Most people spend their whole life becoming someone else's idea of who they should be. Goethe spent his becoming himself. The difference between those two paths is everything. In late 18th century Europe, when genius was measured by how well you mastered what already existed, a young German writer started doing something that made the intellectuals of his time deeply uncomfortable. He kept changing, reinventing, abandoning work at the height of his success to chase something he couldn't fully explain yet. His peers called it instability. He called it necessary. What he was actually doing, though nobody had the language for it at the time, was one of the most disciplined things a person can do. He was paying close attention to who he was becoming and refusing to get stuck as who he had been. The world he lived in rewarded specialization. Pick a lane, master it, be known for one thing. The church wanted obedience to tradition. The court wanted obedience to rank. Even the great universities were essentially factories for repeating what previous thinkers had already said. The idea that a person should continuously transform themselves based on what they were discovering from the inside out was considered self-indulgent at best and dangerous at worst. Today, we've replaced those institutions with different versions of the same impression. Pick a niche, build a brand, be consistent. The algorithm rewards you for staying exactly the same. Your social circle gets uncomfortable when you grow in a direction they didn't anticipate. And somewhere in the middle of all that, most people quietly stop growing and start just maintaining. So how did Goethe resist that? And more importantly, why did it work? He was a child prodigy who wrote a best-selling novel at 24 that made him famous across Europe. The book was so emotionally raw that it reportedly triggered a wave of copycat suicides among readers. He could have spent the rest of his life writing variations of that book. His audience would have loved it. Publishers would have paid him well. Instead, he walked away from that entire version of himself. He moved to a small duchy in Weimar, took a government job managing mines and roads, and largely disappeared from the literary world for nearly a decade. People thought his career was over. Some thought he'd lost his mind. Pay attention to what he was actually doing during those years. He wasn't hiding. He was studying botany, anatomy, optics, geology. He was observing how things grew and changed, not just intellectually, but with genuine obsession. He dissected plants to understand how a single leaf could contain the blueprint for an entire tree. He developed his own theory of color that put him in direct conflict with Newton. He wasn't doing any of this because it was useful for his writing career. He was doing it because something in him needed to understand how living things develop. And then it clicked. He realized he was studying himself. What he kept seeing in nature was a pattern he called metamorphosis. Not random change. Not chaotic reinvention. But a specific process where something becomes more fully itself through transformation. The caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly by rejecting what it was. It contains the butterfly the whole time. Growth isn't addition, it's revelation. He brought this idea back to everything. His writing, his relationships, his understanding of what a human life was actually for. His most famous work, Faust, took him 60 years to finish. 60 years? He started it as a young man and completed it a few weeks before he died at 82. The reason it took that long wasn't laziness or distraction. It was that he could only write each part of it once he had actually lived his way into understanding it. He refused to fake wisdom he hadn't earned yet. That's the moment worth sitting with. He refused to fake wisdom he hadn't earned yet. Most of us do the opposite. We perform the version of ourselves we want to be before we've done the work to actually become it. We post about discipline before we're disciplined. We talk about knowing ourselves before we've spent any real time alone with our actual thoughts. And the performance starts to hollow out the person underneath it. Goethe watched this happen to people all around him. He called it the tragedy of the half-developed person, someone who learned enough to sound wise but stopped before they became it. His answer wasn't more introspection. This is the part that surprises people. He didn't believe you could think your way to knowledge. You had to act your way there. He said something that sounds almost backwards when you first hear it. How can you come to know yourself? Never by thinking, always by doing. Try to do your duty and you'll know right away what you amount to. Read that again slowly. He wasn't saying, ignore your inner life. He was saying, the inner life reveals itself through action, not through sitting still and analyzing yourself. You find out who you are by watching what you actually do when it costs you something. When you're tired, when it would be easier to quit, when the reward is far away and the effort is right now. This is where it becomes practically useful for you today. You probably have a sense of who you want to be. Most people do. The question is whether that sense is accurate or whether it's actually a fantasy you've constructed to avoid the discomfort of finding out what you're really made of. Here's a concrete way to tell the difference. Think about something you say you value. Honesty, maybe, or creativity, or courage, or patience. Now think about the last week of your actual behavior, not your intentions. Not what you planned to do, what you actually did. If there's a gap between what you claim to value and how you spent your hours, that gap is the most important information you have about yourself right now. Not because it means you're a bad person, but because it shows you exactly where your self-knowledge is incomplete. Goethe would say, don't judge the gap, study it, get curious about it. The gap is the thing you haven't grown into yet, and growing into it is the actual work of becoming who you are. He had a phrase for people who understood this. He called them productive natures. Not talented, not intelligent, productive. People who could take what they encountered, including failure, confusion, conflict, contradiction, and turn it into material for further development. Like a tree that grows stronger rings in hard winters, not despite the difficulty, but because of it. The opposite of a productive nature, in his view, was someone who had calcified, who had decided at some point, consciously or not, that they were basically finished, that their personality was fixed, their views were settled, and new experiences were just things to be sorted into categories they already had. He saw this happen to brilliant people all the time. The prodigy who stopped growing at 30, the philosopher who spent 40 years defending the same idea he had at 25. He was terrified of becoming that. It's probably why he kept moving, kept studying, kept writing things that confused people who thought they already knew what he was about. Now here's what this actually means for you in a practical sense. There's something you've been postponing because you don't feel ready yet. A project, a conversation, a change you've been circling for months or years. And the reason you're waiting, if you're honest about it, is that starting it would mean finding out something real about yourself. Whether you can actually do it. Whether you actually want it as much as you say. Whether the person you imagine yourself to be holds up under real conditions. Goethe would tell you that postponing that start is not protecting yourself, it's preventing yourself. Because the self-knowledge you're looking for can only come from the attempt, not from more preparation. Start the thing. Do it badly if you have to. Watch what you do. Watch where you stop. Watch what you're willing to do when nobody is applauding. That information is irreplaceable. No amount of journaling or self-reflection or reading about personal growth will give you what one real attempt at a hard thing will give you. He completed Faust at 82. He was still becoming himself at 82. Most people have decided who they are by 35 and spend the next 50 years defending that decision. He never stopped asking what he was capable of. And the asking never stopped being answered. The person you're becoming is still in there, but it's not waiting for you to figure it out. It's waiting for you to do something. Drop a comment if this one hit differently, and subscribe if you want more of this.